A very warm welcome to today's lecture. This is Dr. Manisha Mirdha. Today we are going to be speaking on global justice. We will try to deal with this topic in two parts. Let's begin with the first part on global justice. As we navigate through the nuances of global justice, I will just briefly tell you what we will be going through in today's lecture. So, we will start by exploring the meaning of global justice. Then we will be looking into the historical background of this concept as in how it originated. We will also try to understand the difference between the concept of international justice and global justice, because there is a difference between these two terms. We will try to also understand the various approaches which are there to study the concept of global justice. So, let us begin for the day. To start with the introduction of the concept. The concept of justice in international relations is a relatively new one, as ancient, medieval and early modern thinkers focused on justice within the state. Delivering justice was mainly the duty of the state, and the international dimension of justice remained neglected. So, it is not that the concept of justice was never spoken of. Justice has been one of the major domains of discussion amongst political thinkers. However, the idea of justice was mostly dominated by the concept of state. It was not understood in the realm of international relations. In fact, John Rawls, who has given theory of justice, a very popular theory of justice, it also set out a theory that political structures can determine who deserves what and why due to the power to make laws, raise taxes and dispense public spending. Therefore, such structures should be built carefully to ensure a just distribution of rights and duties between all citizens. Hence, Rawls' idea was one of distributive justice. Rawls was not advocating for communism where all wealth is shared equally, but for a society where inequality was moderated so that those who were disadvantaged were at least able to live a decent life. So, John Rawls' theory, which talks about justice, also understood justice within the realm of state. He also did not speak of international justice or, for that matter, global justice. Rawls theorized that such a structure could only exist within a democratic society, or in other words, a specific type of state. Therefore, Rawls' account of justice describes the potential for a just human existence for those fortunate enough to live within such a state. But his theory was not designed to apply internationally, as no such formal structure of global distributive justice exists. So, he also understands justice within a state, and a state which, according to John Rawls, has to be essentially a democratic state. In the contemporary times, however, there is a growing interest in international aspects of justice due to the revival of interest in normative political philosophy. Since 1960s especially, there has been intensification of globalization and a shift in how global politics is understood, away from the state-centric approach which existed prior to that. There is a realization that in an interconnected and globalized world, the problems and the solutions have to be global. So, if you just search into the literature of the term global justice, you find that this is a newly prominent expression. Some of the broad topics currently debated under the heading of global justice have been there for some time. It is not that the topics that we discuss under global justice are completely new in their origin. However, they were understood with a different perspective. They were understood under labels such as international ethics, international justice or the law of nations. The concept of global justice is comparatively a newer term in the realm of political theory. For centuries, moral reflection on international relations was focused on matters of war and peace. So, when we were following a state-centric approach and we were trying to understand international justice, it was mostly understood in the light of war and peace. These issues are still important, and other themes have become more prominent due to increasing global interdependence and an erosion of sovereignty. So, we are not denying the fact that the concept of war and peace is no longer important, especially in times where we have seen Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Palestine war. We cannot deny the fact that war is a reality. However, there are other important non-state actors equally important to understand the concept of global justice. And as it is said that justice is a prerequisite for peace. So, if you want a peaceful society to exist, it has to be ensured that justice prevails. The United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights reflect efforts to establish globally uniform minimum standards for the treatment of citizens within their own countries. For those of us who are not very much acquainted with the term Universal Declaration of Human Rights, what this basically means is that the human rights is a document that acts like a global roadmap for freedom and equality, protecting the rights of individuals everywhere around the globe. The Bretton Woods Institution and later the World Trade Organization powerfully shaped the economic prospects of countries and their citizens. Global and regional organizations like the UNSC, which is the UN Security Council, and the European Union have acquired political functions and powers that were traditionally thought to belong to national governments. So, now the shell of national government and its complete jurisdiction over the population is somewhere which is broken. These developments are in part a response to the horrors of World War II. So, why did this idea of justice change? One of the reasons is the world wars that humanity has faced, the catastrophic destruction which has been faced because of these two world wars. But not limited to that, they are also fueled by technological innovations that limit the control governments can exert within their jurisdictions. Thus, industrialization has massive transnational effects that no country can avoid, effects on culture and expectations on biodiversity, climate, ocean, atmosphere, to name a few. New communication technologies make it much harder to control the information available to a national population, and many of the goods demanded by more affluent consumers everywhere require ingredients imported from many foreign lands, which makes globalization a reality. Let us also now go into some historical background of this concept of global justice. In the Western tradition, international justice can be found in the traditional of natural law, which is a system of rights or justice common to all human beings and derived from nature and not rules of the society. So, what is natural law? Natural law is actually a theory in ethics and philosophy that says that human beings possess intrinsic values that govern their reasoning and behavior. Natural law maintains that these rules of right and wrong are inherent in people and are not created by society or any court judges. It is a basic value system of humanity. In fact, Friedman has also said that the history of natural law is a tale of the search of mankind for absolute justice and its failure. Greek Stoics had professed that we have a moral relationship with those beyond our state and believed they were citizens of the world. So, as I said previously, it is not that whatever that we deal in within the concept of global justice is a completely new arena. These terms and these missions have been there previously also, however, they were understood in a different light. The Indian tradition of Vasudev Kutumbakam means the world is one family, spouses the cause of global justice and cooperation. So, within our own Indian tradition and the concept of Vasudev Kutumbakam, we have always been talking about global justice. As we all know, Vasudev Kutumbakam, it's a Sanskrit phrase which means world is a family and emphasizes a global perspective, prioritizing the collective will and the well-being of humanity, and it fosters global solidarity and responsibility. So, therefore, Indian philosophers have also emphasized the value of spiritual dimension of justice, where individuals around the world should be valued. There have always been causes with global approach that have crossed borders, for example, the cause of slave trade or movement against imperialistic operation. So, all of this has also been there, which was within the understanding of the concept of global justice. So, be it the Western tradition or the Indian philosophical thought, the idea of justice in a global context had been there, but a proper organization towards the understanding and dealing of this concept was something which was lacking before 1960s. If we go little more back in the history, and if I just talk about Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who actually did not give a theory of global justice as such, but there were traces of this thought in his ideas. So, if you happen to read Jean-Jacques theory and his social contract theory, we find that within his theory he has implicitly talked about the concept of global justice. He argued that like individuals, states have an incentive to enter into contract when there are no claims against each other, and called it a confederation where states agree not to attack each other. He even focused on rights during the conduct of a war, which points towards a human rights doctrine, an important part of global justice. So, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is otherwise considered to be a realist, also within his narrative talks about the idea of justice even in wars. So, and which is a very important part of humanity and the concept of global justice. One important point needs to be emphasized here. The conception of justice in global context has been idealistic, while in practical terms realism has dominated global politics. As we know by now that there are these two major themes already prevailing in international politics, which try to explain international relations, one of them being idealism or liberalism and the other one being realism. What they are trying to say over here is that the concept of global justice is mainly a liberalist perspective. However, how the interactions proceed in international relations are more realist in nature. So, therefore, this contradiction is what they try to untangle and explain. Classic realism traces its roots from thinkers like Kautilya, Thucydides, Hobbes, Machiavelli, to name a few. And it states that individuals are selfish by nature and believe in self-glorification, including power. To ensure national security, states resort to wars in order to ensure higher levels of security. So, therefore, realists who have always supported a very state-centric approach also believe that states have to resort to some kind of order to ensure human security. In fact, if I just quote Thucydides, who had famously said, "The strong do what they will, the weak suffer what they must." Hence, one can say that realism stands for immoral justice in the global context and is insensitive to the interests of the weaker states and the problems which are common to all mankind, like climate change. There is no dearth of examples in international relations to show prevalence of injustice. So, there are so many examples. As we will be moving on in the first and the second part of this topic, we will try it and understand that the causes or the reasons which have given rise to this understanding of global justice are many, and there is a diversity of opinion in all of that. having said this, it becomes imperative for us to understand the concept in its totality for a peaceful society. In fact, Treaty of Versailles, signed after the First World War and the war crimes trial at Nuremberg and Tokyo after the Second World War, are examples of justice by victorious states. Treaty of Versailles was actually the treaty which formally ended World War I in 1919 and was signed by Germany and the Allied nations. So, the exploitation and injustice which was being done by the industrialized nations also came to an end through this through the end of colonial era. Moving on, as I had said previously, we will also try to understand the difference between the two terms international justice and global justice. There is a difference between the two terms international justice and global justice, as I had previously mentioned. Let us try to have a better understanding of this difference. In case of international justice, the focus is on the state as a unit and the idea of justice among states is discussed. Supporters of international justice believe that inequalities between states should not become wide and efforts are required to keep them at permissible levels. So, international justice is also talking about justice. However, the responsibility of bringing about this justice is given to the state. So, it believes that it is for the state to decide and ensure that a wide disparity between nations does not exist. Global justice is a component in normative international relations theory that focuses on the moral obligation of the world's rich to the world's poor. Here the key theme is redistribution of wealth to reduce poverty and inequality. So, as you can see, in the concept of international justice, it is the state which is the basic unit and which has to ensure that justice prevails. Whereas, in the idea of global justice, it is the individual which is the basic unit and also believes in the idea that there has to be a redistribution of wealth. The wealth of the rich has to go to the poor for an egalitarian society to exist. In global justice, the focus is not on the states but human beings, and it seeks to discuss what justice means to human beings around the world. So, the idea of justice has to be similar for all the populace of the world, not limited to any state. Apart from states, global justice also includes possible agents and organizations that have a duty towards global justice. The individual is at the center of global justice theorists because of three reasons. The three reasons have been cited by Thomas Pogge, and the three reasons are: one, that the individual is the prime unit of moral concern; second, no one should be allowed to suffer for reasons outside of their control; and lastly, if individuals suffer for avoidable reasons, citizens of the richer countries have an obligation of justice towards the global poor. So, these are the three reasons, three very relevant reasons which have been identified by Pogge to explain the relevance of global justice. However, having said this, again, there are advantages with both the terms, the two terms being international justice and global justice, and both have their own advantage. An important advantage of asking what states owe one another is that much international law presupposes the state's system and requires states to perform various actions to promote justice. In this way, responsibilities often appear to be clearly allocated to particular parties, thus making it quite precise who ought to do what in the actual world. So, the advantage of this concept is that a very clearly demarcated duty is assigned to the state, who is empowered to take actions, which is something which is missing in the global world because we do not have a system of world government. However, the advantage of global justice inquiries is that we are not forced to take states as a fixed constraint, and we can therefore consider a range of relevant relationships, capacities and roles that also structure and interactions and might be relevant to how we ought to conceptualize global responsibilities. So, the advantage of this concept is that we are not limited, or the term global justice is not limited to the power of the state. It goes beyond that and outside of its control. So, while asking about what individuals owe each other may well have implications for states and their obligations, a range of other agents and institutions may also have relevant justice obligations. These responsibilities can become more visible when we explore what individuals owe each other. The two approaches have different strengths and can complement each other. However, in contemporary debate, they actually stand against each other. So, after having understood the difference between the two terms, international justice and global justice, we will also just briefly reflect on the idea of human security and global justice. Threats to human beings should be addressed to ensure that individuals have better chances to attain their development. In this regard, the concept of human security is important, which gives importance to human beings and the complex social and economic interactions. It seeks to protect individuals from traditional, which is the military threat, as well as the non-traditional threats like poverty, diseases, etc. It seeks freedom from want and fear for human beings around the globe. So, the idea of global justice also ensures the basic human security, which is again a basic human right of every individual born on this planet. An economist from Pakistan, Mehboob ul Haq, actually drew attention towards human security in the United Nations Development Program. This report highlighted 7 threats to human beings: community, economy, environment, food, health, personal and political. Human security has entered the policy discourse of a number of governments. Actually, Japan and Canada started doing it way back in 1990s and 2000s itself. Each provided a slightly different perception and definition of the concept and customized it according to its own understanding and what suited its most. But at the global level, the agencies of UN work to ensure human security along with the state governments. Human security aims to achieve global justice by ensuring individual welfare. So, after having a brief understanding of what global justice means and how is it different from international justice, we will also now be reflecting on the 3 approaches of understanding global justice. The main 3 perspectives which try to explain global justice are cosmopolitan, communitarian and realist. Cosmopolitan view has a global outlook, while communitarian and realist perspectives are state-centric. Cosmopolitan view of global justice is influenced by Immanuel Kant, who was a liberalist, and his ideas that individual rights in some sense should take precedence over states in international politics. The individual is inviolable as an end in itself, and the state should not treat him as a means. Cosmopolitans make the moral argument that human beings should be seen as basic units who have claim to decent life. The issues of culture or nationality, your gender, your race should not be a hindrance in the achievement of this objective. They believe that as a result of globalization, a basic structure has emerged which impacts lives of people around the world. So, this is one view of global justice. The other view, which is communitarian view, which was mostly propagated by theorists like Hegel. Hegel actually one of his very popular phrases has been that state is the march of God on earth, which is trying to imply that state is the divine manifestation on earth. So, therefore, he has given a very important position to the state itself, and what he says is that it is for the state to decide how it has to care and foster the individuals, allowing his own development as a citizen. Here the political community takes precedence over the individual. This view, as we can see, is in contrast to the cosmopolitan view that emphasizes universal values and the idea of a global community. Communitarians in fact actually argue that a deep, meaningful cultural practice and relation is possible only within the sphere of the state. So, instead of giving a global outlook, communitarians give importance to territorial sovereignty and integrity. Taking this point further by Nagel, he opines that there is a direct link between justice and collective practice, and institutions which can be established only under a sovereign authority. He argues that global justice will not exist as it is linked to associative institutions which are not available at the global level. So, he emphasizes it is eventually the role of the state to ensure justice, be it within the state or outside of the state. According to him, justice is something we owe through our shared institutions only to those we stand in a strong political relation to. It is in the standard terminology that he talks about an associative obligation. His idea is also supported by David Miller, who says that the idea of justice flows from specific cultural contexts which contradict the notion of global justice. We will be talking about David Miller again in the part 2 of this topic. And for him, citizenship and nationality matter the most, which lead to special entitlements and duties. And then the last approach was the realist conception of international relations, which actually is not conducive to the idea of global justice itself. Realism stands for state sovereignty and security against the individual well-being. Realists would argue that states are constantly preparing for war. It is an anarchical system out there. Humanity is basically selfish and egoistic, and because of the absence of a world government, the concept of global justice does not exist. War is more common, war is a reality than peace is. Since state security is paramount for realists, issues like poverty will not be given importance. It is about the survival and the self-interest of the state, which is the prime objective of any state. So, the inference of these three perspectives lead to this understanding that a more cosmopolitan view is required to understand state, and this endeavor has led to the theory of global justice, which seeks to investigate the question of how best to secure a just life for all individuals on planet Earth, regardless of their nationality. So, after having dealt with this, we can come to a kind of a narrative which is the importance of this theory of global justice. In general, a theory of global justice aims to give us an account of what justice on a global scale consists of, and this often includes discussion of the following components. So, any theory of global justice has to take care of these points. The first one being identifying what should count as important problems of global justice. Secondly, positing solutions to each identified problems. Identifying who might have responsibilities in addressing the target problem. Arguing for positions about what particular agents or collection of agents ought to do in connection with solving such a problem, and finally providing a normative view which grounds all the previous 4 points. So, theories of global justice aim to help us understand our world better and what our responsibilities are in it. While some theorists aim purely at theoretical understanding, others also hope to provide an analysis that can be used in practical policy making concerning global justice matters. So, the idea of understanding this concept is not just to give a theoretical paradigm towards the understanding of global justice, but to give a more practical solution for policy making, what policy makers can do to ensure that there is justice and thereby peace, not just in the nation but on a global level also. So, just summing up today's lecture, what we spoke of was problems of global justice arise when one of the following conditions obtained: actions stemming from an agent, institution that can be traced to one or more of the states which has negatively affected residents; institutions practices policies in states that could bring about a benefit or reduce harm to those resident in another state; the normative considerations that require agents in one state to take care of certain actions with respect to agents or entities in other; and finally, we cannot solve a problem that affects residents of one or more states without cooperation from other states. So, conclusively, what I would like to say is that equal respect and treatment of all people should be universal. Equal rights and respect of peoples can be extended to the global context. As people enjoy equality of rights, they should not be prejudiced or discriminated against for reasons having to do with their geographical size or population, religion or race. So, this was a basic understanding of what global justice is. I hope today's lecture was beneficial for all of you. We will be continuing with further nuances of this topic in part 2 of the same topic. Thank you.